I'm going to go through the Module 2 practice test, and you hopefully have corrected what you've done already. Please feel free to pause, rewatch, and fast forward the parts that you need the most. For question 1, they're asking for slope. So remember, slope is m, and that is our rise over run. It is the change in y over the change in x. That is your up and down change over your left and right change, or your vertical change over your horizontal change. Please write that at the top of your paper if it's not there already. And so for part A, it's asking for rise over run. Our rise is 6 and our run is 18. So our slope ratio is 6 over 18. That can be simplified because we can divide the top and bottom by 6. And so that reduces to 1/3. And that's what we'll put on our line right here, 1/3. The next part B, we have to find the slope of this. You might recognize on this that we have x values are the same. And you might recognize, oh, that's a vertical line, and so I know my slope is undefined. But if you don't recognize that, you can still make our little table and put our stack our points on top of each other. 2 minus 2 is increasing by 0, or from 2 to 2 is 0. This one is decreasing by 1 from 5 to 4. If I have -1 over 0 and I divide that on my calculator, I'm going to get an error, and that's how I know that that's undefined. Taking a look at part C, I'm going to stack my numbers again. From 3 to 5 is increasing by 2, and from 1 to -7, picture that on a number line. If I'm right here at 1 on my table and I'm going all the way down to -7, I'm going this way. That is going to be a decrease of 8. And so again, this ratio is going to be able to be reduced. So it's the y's, so -8 over the x's, 2, and I'm able to divide the top and bottom by 2, and this simplifies to -4 over 1, or you could just write that as -4. Be -4 over 1 or -4, either is perfectly correct. D, we're looking at a graph. Between any 2 points, I'm going up 1 and to the right 2, so that slope is going to be 1/2 because it's your vertical change, your up and down change over your left and right change. On E, perpendicular means that we are going to be looking for the opposite and reciprocal. Write that down. If you don't know what that means, you need to add that. Opposite means switch the sign, and reciprocal means flip the fraction. So make sure you have that down. So the only thing I need from the line that's given is the slope, which is always the coefficient in x. So it's not the x, it's just the number in front of x. So I'm looking for at this 2. So the original slope is 2. I'm going to write that as 2 over 1 because I know I need to flip that fraction. So my slope perpendicular has to be negative because this right here is positive, and my fraction, instead of being 2 over 1, has to be 1 over 2. So the perpendicular slope is -1/2. If I take a look at this next one, parallel, the slopes are going to be the same. So I'm only looking for that coefficient of x. I don't need any of that. In fact, you guys can mark that off your paper. You only need the slope of the given line, and this is going to be exactly the same because it's parallel. Vertical lines, you can look in your notes, or you can think of a vertical line, and if you think of its rise, it's going to have some rise, some number, and its run is going to be 0. Any number divided by 0 is undefined. Always true for vertical. Horizontal lines are going this way. That means it has a run, but it has no rise. So the rise would be 0, and the run is some number. It doesn't matter what number, because 0 divided by any number is going to give us 0. So that's what we had to do for this first part where we're finding slope. Be careful to read the directions about what it's asking for. This question 1 was only asking about the slope. Question 2 is asking us to convert into slope-intercept form. If you don't have that written down, that's y equals mx plus b, so write that down. That means I'm going to need to distribute and then collect like terms when I'm in point slope form. So that's y equals 4x minus 12. And then I still have my plus 10 here. My like terms are the minus 12 and the plus 10. So I have y equals 4x, and then minus 12 plus 10 is minus 2. So my answer would be y equals 4x minus 2. From there, let's look at this next one. This one does not have parentheses. It's not point slope form. This is called standard form. And if it doesn't have parentheses, I'm supposed to look for where the y is. And anything that's being added or subtracted, I need to get rid of that. So this positive 7x, I'm going to subtract, and I got to do that on both sides. Now, looking right here, these are not like terms. I cannot combine them. So I'm just going to write them side by side. So this is going to be, I like to put the x first, so negative 7x, because that sign sticks with the coefficient. And then 28 is positive, so it's going to be plus 28. This canceled on the left, and I'm left with my negative 2y. The next thing we're supposed to do is we're supposed to look at anything that is attached to the y, and there's this negative 2 here, and to get rid of that, I need to divide by that value, and if I divide, I have to divide everything by that value. So I'm left with y is equal to, now a negative divided by a negative is a positive, so that's 7/2. That does not come out even. I'm going to leave it like a fraction because slopes are nicer as a fraction. If you divide that in the calculator, you're going to get 3.5, but we don't usually have a decimal as a slope. And then positive 28 divided by negative 2 is negative 14. So our slope-intercept form is here at 7/2 x minus 14. We look at the bottom half of the page, and the directions for question 3 say to graph the following equations. And for each equation, we're supposed to give the slope and the point. So again, let's rewrite on our formulas. And so we have here our slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b. M is our slope, b is our starting point on the y-axis. The y-axis is our vertical axis. And then we also have point slope form, y equals m times x minus x1 plus y1, where x1, y1 is a point on the graphic, represents any point. So looking at this first problem, I can see that the coefficient of x is 1/3. That's my slope. I can see this minus 2 is our y-intercept, and that means the point is 0, -2. We start with our point, so I'm going to plot that on the y-axis. That's here at -2. I go up 1 over 3, up 1 over 3, and it's hitting about here. I can also go down, then I have to go to the left. And so you are going to use a nice straight edge to connect those. Looking at B, again, we have the number in front of x as our slope. When I have just a constant integer, I like to put it over 1. So that's going to be -2 over 1. And then this right here is our starting point. That's going to be 0, 1. So we're starting at positive 1 on the y-axis. And for my slope, I'm going to go down 2 over 1, down 2 over 1. If I go up 2, I have to go to the left. So it all should lie in the line, and you're going to connect that. We always connect our points. You should use a straight edge. Looking at C. Now, if there's no number written in front of the x, you can put that in. That's going to be 1 over 1. So my slope is 1 over 1. My point is still the constant, what's being added or subtracted. And so my point is 0, 3. So on the y-axis, I'm starting up at 3. And my slope is a positive 1 over 1. So up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. If I go down, I have to go to the left one. And then you are just going to draw a line to connect those. So what about D that does not have an x? It has only a constant. It's y equals 4. First of all, where does y equal 4? And if I label my axes, I can see that y is right here. This is one place where y is 4. hopefully you recognize that this is our special case. Our slope for this is going to be 0. Where else is y4 is going to be anywhere along this horizontal line. And so you can put any point. I usually put the y-intercept, which is 0, 4. Now, E is the other kind of special case where we say x is equal to -2. This is my x-axis over here, my horizontal axis, this axis. So if I plot a point at where x is -2, that's right here, and I need to draw a line in which all values are -2, and that's going to be along this vertical line right here. And you might remember from above that our slope is undefined. And you can pick any point. I'm going to pick -2, 0. Notice that it's switched because it is, it doesn't hit the y at all, the y-axis. So it's going to be -2, 0 is the point I'm using. X has to be -2 for any point along that line. So F is in point slope form. You could distribute this and put it in slope-intercept form, but I'm just going to imagine this as a 0 here. And so remember, we can kind of take these points right here, and this is related to our x1 and our y1. And so for our point, we have to switch the sign for what we have here. So I have a -3 in my equation. That means I'm going to have a +3 in my ordered pair, and I don't have anything on the outside, so I'm going to have 0 there. So the x value always switches sign. Now my slope is right here, that -2. I'm going to write that as -2/1. So I have both my vertical and horizontal change. So 3, 0 is this point right here. And from that point, I'm going to go down 2 to the right 1. And I can keep doing that. If I go up 2, I have to go to the left 1. And so you're just going to connect with a nice straight edge through those points. Remember, you can go to my solution PDF to look at any of this in more detail. Let's flip to the second page. Again, at the top of my page, I'm putting the 2 main formulas that I have for lines, my slope-intercept form and my point-slope form. You should do that too. It should be on your page at least one time, but I'd put it at the top of every sheet. So looking at this one, this part G is in slope-intercept form. I'm sorry, in point-slope form. The negative here in front of my parentheses, remember you can always think of that as like sticking a 1 in there. So my slope is -1/1. And my point, again, we're looking at this whole thing right here. The x switches sign, so it's going to be a +2. The y does not. It's going to stay +1. That is the starting point. So at 2, 1, I'm going to go to the right 2, up 1. That's my point. And then my slope is -1. That means I'm going to go down 1, right 1, down 1, right 1, and it's going to go in this pattern. If I go up, I have to go to the left, and you'll see that that all falls in a line. And so you're going to use your straight edge to draw a nice straight line there. For H, same situation. It's in point slope form. And it does not have a number. It just has that negative. So we're going to slip a little -1 in there. So my slope is -1/1. And my point, again, I'm looking at this. This is in the right order. And for the x, I'm seeing a +3 here. That means I have a -3 in my point. And then here I see a -4, and that's going to stay -4 in my point. So when I plot this, I'm going to go to the -3 on my x, and then go down to -4 on my y. So that's my first point right here at -3, -4. And then from there, I'm going to go down 1 to the right 1. That's kind of over where I wrote that. You can also go up 1 to the left 1, and you probably want to do that because this is a really small part of the graph, and then you're going to use your straight edge to draw your line. Now we're going to be writing the equation. Circle that word equation. and circle where it's saying slope-intercept form. So everything is going to be in y equals mx plus b, unless it is a horizontal or vertical line, and then you can use those special case formulas, the x equals and the y equals. So this is the big bulk of your test. One whole page of your test has questions just like this. So this first one is ready to go. They tell you the slope and they tell you the y-intercept. The slope is the m, the y-intercept is the b. So to write this, it's just going to be y equals my slope, 2x, and then minus 8, because that was my y-intercept. For part B, we have to do a little bit more work. We have to start in point slope form and then simplify to slope intercept form because we don't have the y-intercept. Here we have just any point. We have 2, 6. It's a point on our line, and it goes through this slope. So we're going to use our point slope formula, and that is going to be y equals our m, which is 3/4, and then x minus 2. This is our x1, y1 right here, and this is our m, and then plus 6. We are not done yet. We have to distribute. So we're going to distribute that there. So we have y equals 3/4 x minus, now when I take 3/4 times 2, I get 3/2. You can use your calculator to get that value. You get 6/4, which reduces to 3/2 when you multiply through, and I still have this 6 here. I'm going to think of this 6 as 12/2, so I can combine like terms with a common denominator. So y equals 3/4 x, and then I have minus 3/2 and plus 12/2, and so that means I'm going to have a plus 9/2. And you can just leave this as a fraction. That's 4.5. If you did it on your calculator, you might get it that way, but that is fine to leave it in that fractional form. Let's take a look at part C. So part C adds in another step. We have to find the slope first. So if I put that 6, -5 on top or below my other point, I can use my table to find my slope. So from 6 to 3 is decreasing by 3, and from -5 to 7, that is increasing, and it's increasing by 12. So again, picture that number line if you need to get those values. So my slope is 12 over -3. That can be simplified. You can divide the top and bottom by 3, and I end up with -4 over 1. Doesn't matter if that negative's in the bottom or out in front or in the numerator. Either which way is fine. So to write this in point slope form, it does not matter whether you use the 3/7 or the 6 -5. I think I'll use the 3/7 because they're both positive. So y equals -4, x minus 3 plus 7. And now to get this in slope intercept form, because that's how we're supposed to give all these answers, I have to distribute first. So y equals -4x plus 12, and I still have my plus 7 out here. Y equals -4x, and then these are both positive, so I'm just going to add those up, and that gives me 19. So y equals -4x plus 19 is in my slope intercept form. For part D, they give us 3 points here. You don't have to find the slope through all of them. I do like to make sure that it is consistent. And we can choose any point, but we're lucky here because this point right here is our y-intercept. So we can skip the point slope form in this problem if we recognize that. You will likely see something like this on your test. So if I look here, I'm decreasing by 3, and I am all the way down my table. This is increasing by 2, all the way down my table as well. So again, remember my slope is the change in y, which was -3, over my change in x, which is plus 2. -3/2 does not reduce. Like I said, this right here is our y-intercept, so I can jump right here. I don't have to do point slope form. You can, if you don't recognize that, let me just erase that, because I can just go right to negative 3x and then plus 5 as my slope-intercept form of my equation. Let's skip down to the bottom half of the page. So for f, we are again looking at parallel. Every time I see the word parallel, I like to circle that and write the same. That means I'm looking at slope. I see the 1/2 here. I don't need any of the rest of that. So I can take that 1/2 x, and we're going to start in point slope again because the point that's given to me that I have to use is not the y-intercept. So I have 1/2, and I'll have x minus 4 minus 1. And the reason is this is a plus 4 here, which means it's a minus 4 in my equation. The y stays the same. So minus 1 stays minus 1. Now I need to distribute. So I'm going to distribute that 1/2. And I have y equals 1/2 x. 1/2 of negative 4 is negative 2, and I still have my minus 1. Now I need to collect like terms, and I have y equals 1/2 x minus 3, and that is my slope-intercept form of a line parallel to the given line up here that goes through this point. For G, it's perpendicular. So again, remind yourself that this is opposite reciprocal. It has to be both of those things. So I need to have the slope, that's 3. I don't need anything else. So my original slope is 3, and I'm looking for the slope that's perpendicular. And if you remember, we flip the fraction and switch the sign. So it's a positive original, so I'm going to make it negative. And it was 3, which is the same as 3 over 1, so I'm going to make that 1 over 3. That's my new slope. And it has to go through this point right here. That is negative 6, positive 9. So y equals negative 1/3 x plus 6, because I have a minus 6 here. These have to be opposite. And then plus 9, because I have a positive here, it's going to stay positive for my y. Now I'm going to do my distribution again, multiplying that 1/3 into both of those terms. Negative 1/3 x plus, now negative 1/3 times 6. And again, you can do this in your calculator. I put a plus, but I'm actually going to change that because a negative times a positive is a negative. So I have negative 2 here, and I have the plus 9 from outside my parentheses. And when I do this, I'm going to collect my like terms here. So I'm left with y is equal to negative 1/3 x. My minus 2 and plus 9 gives me plus 7. And that is my slope-intercept form final equation for G. For H and I need to look at the graph to write in slope-intercept form. And this is nice because we're given the y-intercept in both of these, where it crosses the y-axis. And that is helpful. So now we just need to calculate the slope. So for H, I'm looking at where it's hitting. I can see this is a point. I'm going up 1 over 2. It is a positive 1/2 for my slope. So my equation is simply going to be y equals 1/2 x. And that was hitting at 3, so it's going to be plus 3. And that's my slope-intercept form equation. If you want, you can write that point right there so you can recognize that later when you're referring back to this. Now for I, this line has a slope of 0 because it's a horizontal line. Another thing I like to look at, so this is 0, 4 right here. If I pick this point over here, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that's negative 5, 4. And if I pick this point right here, it's 3, 4. Everywhere I look here, the y values along that line are 4. That helps me recognize that my equation is simply y equals 4. So take a look at this whole sheet. Again, you can pause here or refer back to the PDF of your key to really make sure you have all of the details. Let's flip to the next page. For question 6, it says write an equation in point slope form. So go ahead. We're writing an equation again that's going to have a y equals. It's going to be point slope form. Let's write that out. Y equals m times the quantity x minus x1 plus y1. I'm going to zoom in here so that we can see our top question a little closer. So we have two graphs again, graph A and graph B. Looks like that didn't come through on here, so we'll put our A and B here so we know what we're talking about. So again, we have to find the slope, and we can use any point. That means some of you might have different equations. So I'll go ahead and put both of the equations down. Let's find the slope first. We've labeled the points here. So I'm going down 2 over 4. And so down 2 over 4, we should recognize that this is negative because my graph is falling. And so the slope here, -2/4, reduces to -1 over 2. So y equals -1 over 2 is going to be the slope. That's always the coefficient of x. So if I look at this point right here and label that, that is -3, +1 for that point right there. And so if I'm writing that equation, it is going to be x plus 3, and then I have +1 on the outside. So that's one of our equations. If I wanted to do this point right here, that point is +1, -1. And if I use that point, now the y equals and the -1/2 stays the same. Actually, our x stays the same as well. When we put that number in, it's going to be -1 because it's always the opposite for the x, and then -1 out on the outside because that value stays the same. I wrote my second equation in my B spot, so I'm just going to slide my B line further down, and we'll put a couple there for B as well. So let's look at what the slope is for B. It is up 2 over 1. So my slope for this one is 2 over 1. So for my equations, it's going to be y equals 2. You can put 2 over 1 if you want, or just 2. And I'm going to do this for both of the points that are labeled on my graph. So if I pick this point right here, that's hitting at -1, 0. If I put that in, it's going to be y equals 2 times the quantity x plus 1, and then +0 on the outside, because if I have a negative right here, that means I'm going to have a plus in the equation. These will always be opposites. If I use the other point that is a dot written out right here, that is -2, -2. And if I'm putting that in, I'm going to have y equals 2 times the quantity x plus 2, and then -2 on the outside. Again, we should have this being the opposite sign here and this being the same sign. So let's take a look at our last question, our application. So we have two scenarios. We have an A and a B. The first one is about lawn mowing business. And so for each one, we're going to define our variables, write our equation, and label our answer with units. You will have to do this on your test as well. So to define my variable, we have to read our scenario and figure out what we're talking about. So we're talking here, we have a lawn mowing business where you charge a flat fee, and then we have a cost per lawn. So we have number of lawns and the amount of money we make or revenue. And so it's up to you. I'm going to use X and Y just like we have been, but if you want to use L and C or R for revenue, L for lawns, I'm going to use X to be the number of lawns and Y to be my revenue, what I earn. And let me pick a better color than green. All right, so we can put this in slope-intercept form already because we have a flat fee. This is our fixed amount. That's like our y-intercept, and this is our rate, which is our slope. So our y-intercept is always the flat fee or a fixed amount, and then the rate is always our slope. So we can put that in our equation. Y equals 50 times every lawn that we mow plus the one-time flat fee of $30. So that's our equation. And it's saying how much would you make if you mowed 8 lawns? You would take our equation, 50, and we're going to plug in 8 for X because X is our number of lawns that we've labeled up here. And then we are going to add that $30 to that. So 50 times 8 is 400. And if we add that 30 to that, we get $430. And that's what we're going to write right here. And then it says, how many lawns would you have to mow in order to buy a $350 gift for your math teacher? Wow, that's so generous of you. That's a Y value. And so we have to plug that in for Y. So 350 equals 50x plus 30. If you use those Mod 1 skills to solve for x, I'm going to start by subtracting 30. And we end up with 320 is equal to 50x, and that cancels out. We'd want to divide both sides by 50. And we end up with x is equal to 6.4. So we actually will need to mow 7 lawns. We're going to not use our rules of rounding because if we do 6 lawns, we won't get enough money in order to get the full 350. So that is what we do for question 7. A. Now we're going to look at B. So I'm going to slide down again and get all of that here. And I'm also going to erase where we've written on our next question. So looking here, we have a bus company taking a tour on the ferry where there are 50 people aboard. The ferry charged the bus company $190. The following week, the bus had 70 people on board and the ferry charged $230. So we don't have the rate yet. We have to get the rate, and that's why this table is here. So when we think about our X and our Y, I like to put them in the table like we normally would. We have number of people and we have money. Number of people is independent. Who decides to come on the boat, we don't have control over. How much we charge them, we do. So kind of thinking of them in the same way you would think in science class about independent and dependent. X is always our independent variable. That just helps us. You can do it the other way, but sometimes it can be confusing. So our X is number of people, and our Y is our money. We can define that down here as well. I'm going to call that's also our revenue, or you might say cost, and you know that that's going to be our money. And so when there were 50 people, it cost $190. And when there were 70 people, it cost $230. And so we want to write this in point slope form. We need to have our slope no matter what kind of equation we have. So if I look here, 50 to 70 is 20 people. And from 190 to 230, that is $40. And so my slope is going to be $40 per 20 people. And I probably want to reduce that. And that's pretty easy to do. What's 20 divided by 40? Sorry, 40 divided by 20. And that's 2. So that's going to be $2 per one person. So when I write this in my point slope form, Y equals my slope. I'm going to use 2. X minus one of my X values. I'll just use the top one and take 50. And then plus the Y value, which goes with 50, which is 190. And then it's saying how much would it cost with 45 people on board? Since I know later that I need to know the initial cost for the empty bus and the cost per person, I think it's helpful to put this in slope-intercept form. So I'm going to do it now because it's easier than to plug the 45 into the more simplistic, simplified equation. So I'm going to start by distributing and then collecting like terms. So I would have y equals 2x minus 100. I still have that plus 190. Collecting my like terms here, I have 2x, and then that's going to be plus 90. That's my simplified equation. And then going from there, I'm going to plug in my 45. You could plug in the 45 in for x into your point slope form or the simplified slope intercept form. I'm going to use the slope intercept form because it's just less work. I've already done the work. So I'm going to have y equals 2 times 45. And then I have plus 90. So y is equal to, now 2 times 45 is 90. I have another 90 out here, so that's going to be 180. So if there's 45 people on board, it's going to cost $180. That's what's going to go on that line. Now, what is the initial cost? That is our fixed fee, the one-time fee. And if you're looking at slope intercept form, that's always what's being added or subtracted to that. So that's going to be $90. And then my cost per person is my slope. And we've done that up here. And we know that that is $2 per person. Again, you can pause this to look more closely at the solutions or look at the PDF file. Make sure you add all of the details that you're going to need to remember how to do these problems when you take your test.